This show is introduced to you by Global Healthy Living Foundation. The Global Healthy Living Foundation is a non-profit working to improve the quality of life for people living with chronic conditions through advocacy, education, and patient-centred research. We wish to acknowledge the Dukandjung people as traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work. I pay respects to the elders past, present, and future. Welcome to A Matter of Vax. I'm your host, Steph O'Connell. I'm a health advocate and health communicator with a career in public health and public affairs. Renza Skabilla is a woman who's used to being heard. She has a love of language and words, which we share, but she chooses hers really well, and she really connects with people that she's communicating with. It's been her trademark. She's a diabetes advocate, an international speaker, a media spokesperson for most of her life, and she's the owner and writer of a blog, Diabetogenic. Renza is currently a manager for type 1 diabetes and communities at Diabetes Australia. She holds several community advisory board posts. She's my guest today. Please welcome Renza.
Oh, Steph, how are you?
I'm really well. How are you?
Oh, I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting me to have a chat with you.
You were a spokesperson for people around the world with diabetes. How did that affect you?
We had to spring into action as a diabetes organisation because we needed to reassure people or explain to people this is how diabetes and COVID coexist. What is the interrelation between the two? And of course, at that time, there was so little data and there was so little known. So all we could really keep reminding people was, look, what we know is at this stage, it doesn't look like if you have diabetes, you are more at risk of getting the virus. But certainly, just as with any infection, if you do get it, it's going to be harder to deal with. That's what diabetes does. So we ran a number of different campaigns that would just really stay connected. We kept talking about physical distancing, and we really wanted to change, or social distancing is what the language that we were using. And we really wanted to change that to physical distancing because staying connected was really important. And also putting out lots of messages around, please don't stockpile diabetes supplies and medications. There's lots out there. You only need your usual supplies. You will not run out. Australia will not run out of insulin. So that was a lot of that messaging. I was taking the advice that we as a diabetes organisation were giving. I was staying home. My husband is a teacher, so at that stage he wasn't able to stay home, and my daughter is in year 11, so she was still going to school. But we were very, very cautious. We started limiting who we were seeing, certainly weren't going out for coffee and for lunches anymore. We were just really, really starting to steer clear of people because we just didn't know what we were dealing with. I think that from the beginning, the messaging that we had was that it was only people who were older or living with a chronic health condition needed to worry about it. And we're like, well, that's us. That's us. And so the way that it was spoken about was in such a dismissive way. These people are expendable. We have one foot in the grave already. And so we were trying to really deal with the concerns and the fears that people were having, and also to position it in a way so that people could understand what it all meant. You know, we just wanted to make sense of it. Like when you say that I'm at increased risk, what does that mean? And so we spent quite a lot of time, certainly not sugarcoating it and telling everyone you're going to be fine. That's certainly not what the role of any health organisation is. But we were really trying to be very careful with dealing with the media and the way that politicians were talking about it, which was that we don't really care about these people. They're the ones at risk. Everyone else will be fine. And we know now that's not the case anyway, although that language has continued to date, unfortunately. But we knew that there were people who were very, very scared.
I was last week speaking to Professor Greg Dorr from Kirby Institute and St Vincent's Hospital, and we spoke about vulnerable and most vulnerable. And then, of course, in the interim, hashtag underlying conditions made the front page. I think there's a set of language rules that we could be living by.
I was tuning into the 11 a.m. New South Wales conference every morning. And I can still remember the first time that the Premier said, this person died, but they did have underlying health conditions. And it jarred. Like I remember it, I gasped. It was presented in a way that sounded like the person was to blame. Now, I live with type 1 diabetes. We love to point fingers at people with diabetes. You brought it on yourself. if you had to exercise a bit more and stopped eating McDonald's, you'd be fine. So I live with a health condition that I'm always on heightened alert around this blaming and shaming and stigma. And I thought, wow, this is now making its way even more into COVID. We'd already had it at the beginning, but this suddenly now was people who were dying from COVID. And I watched every single one of the Vic presses last year, and I'm pretty sure that not once did the underlying health condition status of any of the people who tragically died get a mention. Their age was mentioned, but whether or not they had underlying health conditions just didn't get mentioned. And I just thought, wow, that's awful.
How does someone with a chronic condition navigate and survive that kind of language?
You build a bunker where there's no Wi-Fi, and then you just tune out from every single media source possible. But the reality is, of course, we don't do that. We turn to our peers because that's where I know I get so much strength. So there was that incredible thread that started on Twitter last week, underlying condition, and just seeing the voices and seeing the faces. I love that we were putting faces to the conditions because we are real people.
Do you think people with chronic conditions have a loud enough voice in Australia?
I think that there are too many examples of where we're not given a seat at the table, and when we are, we have no ability to influence. That's the bit that's key here. So it's not just enough to be heard. We have to then be in positions where we're actually able to make a difference. So the simple answer is no, I don't think we do. I absolutely don't think we do.
And what's the answer to that?
Yeah, look, in a perfect world, I would say that that incredibly powerful phrase, nothing about us without us, actually, we start living it.
I'm wondering what the future looks like. I can hear the voices of people with chronic conditions, hear their hesitancy about flinging open that door, hear the fear that they've grown accustomed to, worrying if they are the most vulnerable, if their underlying condition is something that will put them in hospital. Those people, what does the future look like for them?
Yeah, I mean, this is the big opening, but it is a different situation now as we're seeing higher vax rates in the community. But I also think there is an issue with the way that we're presenting it, because I feel like it's too much that people are just thinking, oh, well, we'll all be fine. And clearly we're not going to be fine. And you just need to take a look at what's going on in the UK to see that. I mean, you just need to look at that right now, today, to see that it isn't back to business as usual. Everything's going to be fine. We can start jumping on aeroplanes. We've got nothing to worry about. So, and there will always be vulnerable groups within that. There will be unvaccinated groups.
When vaccinations were announced and 1B, most chronic conditions and vulnerable people fell into that category, there was language around getting vaccinated at the time that told us to speak to our GP if we had concerns. Do you think there was enough information about that for most people with a chronic condition?
No, I don't, because every condition is going to have different risks and considerations, and I don't think that the information was being individualized enough. So the risk for somebody with condition A is going to be very different for somebody with condition B. So I think that was not particularly well communicated at all. And then for people actually going and speaking with their health professionals about their own individual experience and what they should be thinking about, I don't think that there was that information available. Often it was just simply get vaccinated, which isn't addressing the concerns that some people might have. And if you're being told speak to your GP if you have concerns, well, then it should be a dialogue, not a just go and get it done. I believe that the overarching message actually should be just go and get it done. But there has to be an opportunity for there to be a dialogue around that, about why it's safe. And we've seen some really great examples of people talking about how they've had conversations with people who have been a little bit unsure about it. And because once they've broken down the science or cast aside the science and talked more about the experience of it and concerns, that people have gone, yep, okay, I'm going to go and get it done. And they've quite happily done that. I don't think necessarily those though, that was happening by and large or routinely for a lot of people who were having those concerns. And, for a lot of people, sometimes those concerns are absolutely about, how is my chronic health condition going to interact with this vaccine and what's that going to look like? And I should just point out that from a diabetes organisation point of view, we were really clear about that, because absolutely your diabetes, your blood sugar levels can definitely be affected if you have a vaccine. So from a diabetes organisation perspective, we were making that really clear to people that it's absolutely recommended and safe for people with diabetes. But what you got to remember is it might affect your glucose levels. It could make you go high a little bit, so you might need a bit of extra insulin. Could make you go low. Just keep an eye on it. The way you deal with this is check your glucose levels more frequently and talk to your diabetes healthcare team if you've got any questions. So that was addressing the diabetes specific bit, right? But I don't think that there was enough of that out there so that people could feel that reassurance. And in a lot of cases, I guess people felt that they were being dismissed or belittled for daring to have those questions, but there just didn't seem to be a routine and decent way, I guess, of having those conversations.
It did put pressure on healthcare organisations.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're there, though, to do, is to communicate these sorts of things en masse, because we know that for a lot of people, that would have been the first thing that came into their mind was, how's it going to affect my diabetes management? So if we can answer that, and of course, we can't say it is going to do this because diabetes doesn't have a rule book. And so you can't say this is exactly what's going to happen. It's going to last for this many minutes and then you're going to be fine and then you'll all be fabulous again, because that's not how diabetes or any other health condition, I don't think, works. So putting across the different scenarios to, I guess, alleviate some of those concerns, though, or address some of those concerns that people have, well, hopefully that could have then perhaps taken a bit of the pressure off GPs or healthcare professionals who were probably going to be asked the same questions over and over again, whatever the health condition was. But in diabetes, probably would have been, what's it going to do to my diabetes management? Do I need to think about my medication and the doses that I'm taking? Do I need to think about X, Y, and Z? What should I be worried about? At what point should I go, yep, this is a problem? We were trying to preempt what those concerns would be and to answer them as best that we could. And I know that other organisations were in the same boat. They were trying to do the same thing. And we're still trying to do that now. We're still trying to do that.
It sounds like there's a role going forward to ensure that communities are getting the tailored communication that they need around vaccination. It's been great talking to you. Talking about vaccination and your health can be a difficult conversation. Our hope is to make it easier for you to understand and communicate these important subjects to your community. Please share this podcast with friends and family and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast to hear more of Matter of Vax. To learn more, please visit our website ghlf.org.au for vaccination facts, video explainers and patient stories from all over Australia. And be sure to subscribe to our news and community support from GHLF. You can also find us at Facebook and Twitter at GHLF Australia. I'm Steph O'Connell for Global Healthy Living Foundation, and this is Matter of Vax.